Live from the BDN Studios, it's Bang and Dang.
That's awesome.
If you don't like that, then
You ain't black.
Welcome back to Battles of American Civil War, Behind the Battles. Moving on to the Confederate side once again as we take a look at
Lee's right-hand
Lee.
man.
Well, according to him and his left-hand man, I guess.
Right.
But more accurately is Lee's old war horse. He was the James Longstreet. He was the principal subordinate to General Robert E. Lee. So that means it was Longstreet and then Robert. That was it.
Yep.
He served under Lee as corps commander for most of the battles, obviously a lot of battles. And out of everybody we covered so far, of course, he's in the Mexican-American War, but that dude has almost as many Mexican-American War battles as he does the Civil War. So this dude was doing some stuff.
The Union would love to have him on their side.
Yeah, they did at one time, up until 61. And then, everybody probably remembers him more for, what would he be most known for?
Just
being there?
Just hanging out with
just being there? Or failing during Pickett's charge?
Yeah, it wasn't his fault. That was Pickett's fault.
Well, okay, we'll get to that. James Longstreet. He was born January 8, 1821 in Edgefield District, South Carolina, which is now part of North Augusta, Edgefield County. Fifth child and third son of James Longstreet, of Dutch descent, and Mary Ann Dent, of English descent.
He's a Dutchman, huh?
Originally from New Jersey and Maryland, respectively, they owned a cotton plantation close to where the village of Gainesville would be founded in northeastern Georgia.
Okay.
James' ancestor, Dirk Stoffels Langstreet, he immigrated to the Dutch colony of New Netherland in 1657, but the name was angelicized. The name was modernized for people over here so they could actually say their name.
Right.
To Longstreet, clearly.
That's fantastic. The family was moderately prosperous. Held dozens of slaves. James's daddy was impressed by his son's rock-like character, giving him the nickname Peter. And he was known as Pete or Old Pete for the rest of his life. Longstreet's daddy decided on a military career for his son, but he felt that the available local education would not be adequate preparation for him. So, at the age of 9, James, he's sent away to live with his Aunt Frances Eliza and Uncle Augustus Baldwin Longstreet in Augusta, Georgia.
It's Augusta.
James spent 8 years at his uncle's plantation, which he called Westover, just outside the city while he attended the Academy of Richmond County.
Richmond, huh? His father, unfortunately, he died from cholera.
Damn it.
It was an epidemic where they lived while visiting Augusta in 1833. Oh, wow. Although James's mother and the rest of the family moved to Summerville, Alabama, following his father's death, James remained with his uncle.
Yeah.
As a boy, Longstreet enjoyed swimming, hunting, fishing, and riding horses.
I bet he did.
He then became adept at shooting firearms. Northern Georgia was a very rural frontier territory, and Southern aristocratic traditions had not yet taken hold.
Okay.
As a result of that, Longstreet's manners were sometimes rather rough in spite of his plantation background. Yeah.
Right.
He didn't say ma'am or sir.
Right.
He dressed unceremoniously and at times used coarse language, although never in the presence of women.
Man, they never did. Good for you, bud.
So he was like any other guy.
Right. A little bit later on in his life, Longstreet described his aunt and uncle as caring and loving. He made no known political statements before the war, and it appears to have been largely uninterested in politics altogether. But Augustus, as a lawyer, judge, newspaper editor, and Methodist minister,
Jeez, guys,
was a
sleep.
fierce states' right partisan who supported South Carolina during the nullification crisis. That was in 1828, 1833. And these ideas to which Longstreet probably would have been exposed to.
I would assume so.
Right. Augustus was also known for drinking whiskey and playing cards at a time when many Americans considered them immoral. These habits he passed along to Longstreet.
Okay, I don't know why.
Drinking cards and drinking cards and playing whiskey. Drinking whiskey and playing cards was immoral, huh?
I guess so. Well, in 1837, Augustus, he attempted to obtain an appointment for his nephew to the United States Military Academy.
Okay.
But the vacancy for his congressional district had already been filled.
No, next year, bud.
Longstreet was then appointed the following year by a relative, Reuben Chapman, who represented the 1st District of Alabama, where Mary Longstreet had lived.
Oh, cool.
Awesome. Longstreet, he was a poor student.
Wow.
By his own admission in his memoirs, he said he had more interest in the school of soldier, horsemanship, exercise, and the outside game of football than in academic courses, obviously.
Nice.
Why do you think football, huh? Soccer?
Yeah, probably. Longstreet, he ranked in the bottom third of every subject during his 4 years at the academy. In January of his third year, he initially failed his mechanics exam, but he took a second test 2 days later and he passed it. Longstreet's engineering instructor in his fourth year was Dennis Hart Mahan, who stressed swift maneuvering, protection of interior lines, and positioning troops in strategic points rather than attempting to destroy the enemy's army outright. Although Longstreet earned modest grades in the course, he used similar tactics during the Civil War. Okay. Longstreet was also a disciplinary problem at West Point as well.
I bet he was. He earned a large number of demerits, especially in his final 2 years. His offenses included visiting after taps was played, absence at roll call, an untidy room, long hair, causing a disturbance during study time, and disobeying any order, basically.
Oh, wow.
Biographer Jeffrey Wirt, he says, Longstreet was neither a model student nor a gentleman.
Hey, that's what you want in war, right?
Yeah. Longstreet, he was popular with his classmates, however, and befriended a number of men who would become prominent during the Civil War, which included George Henry Thomas, Williams Rosecrans, who was his roommate, John Pope, Dan Harvey, D.H. Hill, Lafayette McLaws, George Pickett, and old U.S. Grant himself.
Damn, so he's splitting. So you got friends on both sides.
Well, they all did.
Good for you.
Longstreet, he ranked 54th out of 56 cadets when he graduated in 1842. Who was the other two? Yeah. He was commissioned a brevet second lieutenant in the United States Army thereafter.
Wow. After a brief furlough, Longstreet, he was stationed for 2 years at the 4th U.S. Infantry at Jefferson Barracks. This is in Missouri. Under the command of Lieutenant Colonel John Garland. I think he's related to Jeff. 1843. 1843. He was,
Judy.
Right. 1843, he was joined by his friend, Lieutenant Ulysses S. Grant. In 1844, Longstreet met Garland's daughter, his future wife.
What is up with these guys that we've done? They all marry their commander's daughters.
Right. It's probably the first girl he's seen. Her name, Maria Louisa Garland. She was called Louise by her family.
All right. I guess there's probably 100 other Marias in their family.
At about the same time Longstreet began courting Louis. At about the same time that Longstreet began courting Louise, Grant courted Longstreet's fourth cousin, Julia Dent.
Oh, Julia.
And the couple eventually married. Wow, so they're tied to each other somewhat. Longstreet attended the Grant wedding on August 22nd, 1848. This was in St. Louis. But his role at the ceremony remains unclear.
He was a fucking partier, dude.
Right.
Well, Grant biographers John Edward Smith and Ron Chernow, they state that Longstreet served as best man. I don't know if they have any evidence for this, but John Y. Simon, editor of Julia Grant's memoirs, he concluded that Longstreet may have been a groomsman. And Longstreet biographer Donald Brigman Sanger, he called the role of a best man uncertain, while noting that neither Grant nor Longstreet mentioned such a role in their memoirs. Okay.
It isn't written down anywhere?
Right. They don't have like a
marriage certificate or something? Later on in 1844, his regiment, along with the 3rd Infantry, was transferred to Camp Salubrity near Natchitoches, Louisiana, as part of an army of observation under Major General Zachary Taylor.
Zachy.
8th of March, 1845, Longstreet, he promoted 2nd lieutenant and transferred to the 8th Infantry, which was at Fort Marion in St. Augustine, Florida. He served for a month. He served the month of August on court-martial duty in Pensacola. The regiment was then transferred to Corpus Christi, Texas, where he was reunited with the officers of the 3rd and the 4th regiments, including his buddy Grant.
Okay.
The men passed the winter by stage and plays.
Okay.
I wonder who played the women.
Grant.
Right.
Longstreet served with distinction in the Mexican-American War with the 8th U.S. Infantry. He fought under Zachary Taylor as lieutenant in May 1846 in the battles of Palo Alto and Resaca de la Palma.
Okay.
He recounted both of these battles in his memoirs, but wrote nothing about his personal role in them. June 10th, Longstreet was given command of Company A of the 8th Infantry of William Worth's 2nd Division. He then fought again with Taylor's army in the Battle of Monterey in September 1846, during which about 200 Mexican lancers drove back a group of American troops.
Oh, wow.
Longstreet, commanding Companies A and B, he led the counterattack, killing or wounding almost half of the lancers.
23rd of February, 1847, promoted again to the rank of 1st lieutenant. General-in-Chief Winfield Scott ordered Worth's division out of Taylor's army and under his direct command to participate in an assault on the Mexican capital of Mexico City. Oh, boy. That division was sent first to Labos Island, then sailed 180 miles south to Veracruz. Worth led Scott's army in an amphibious approach onto the city. I think we had this with somebody else. Ulysses S. Grant.
Possible, but I doubt it, because it's not in the same thing.
I'm pretty sure we did the Mexico City assault with somebody.
Well, we've mentioned it a bunch of times. I think this is the only time we got into it.
Oh, they arrived on the 9th of March. Scott besieged the city and subjected it to regular bombardments. The city surrendered on 29th of March, 1847. The American army then marched north towards the capital.
In August, Longstreet served in the Battle of Churubusco, which was a pivotal battle as the U.S. Army moved closer to capturing Mexico City. The 8th Infantry was the only force in Worth's division to reach the Mexican earthworks. Longstreet carried the regimental banner under heavy Mexican fire. The troops found themselves stuck in a ditch and could only scale the Mexican defenses by standing on each other.
Oh.
In the fierce hand-to-hand combat that ensued, the Americans prevailed. Longstreet, he received a brevet promotion to captain for his actions. And then he received a brevet promotion to major for Molino del Rey, that battle.
In the Battle of Chapultepec on the 12th of September, he was wounded in the thigh while charging up the hill with his regimental colors. He fell, handed the flag to his friend, Lieutenant Pickett, who was able to reach the summit. The capture of the Chapultepec fortress led to the fall of Mexico City. Longstreet recovered in the home of the Escandon family, which treated wounded American soldiers, and they treated them well. His wound was slow to heal, and he did not leave until December.
Yeah.
After a brief visit with his family, Longstreet, he said, I'm going to Missouri. I'm going to see my sweet Louise.
Sweet Louise. After the war and his recovery, Longstreet and Louise, they were married officially March 8th, 1848. The marriage produced 10 children.
Ooh.
Little is known of their courtship or marriage.
No.
Longstreet rarely mentions her in his memoirs and never reveals any personal details. That's the way it should be, bud.
Good for him, man.
There are no surviving letters between the two either.
Oh.
Most anecdotes about the relationship come through the writings of Longstreet's second wife, Helen Dortch Longstreet.
Oh.
Novelist Ben Ames Williams, a descendant of Longstreet, included Longstreet as a minor character in 2 novels. All right. Williams questioned Longstreet's surviving children and grandchildren and depicted him as a devoted family man with an exceptionally happy marriage.
Oh, good for him.
A happy marriage, but he remarried?
Right.
Oh, it's only because she died.
Oh. Longstreet next served several months of recruiting duty in Poughkeepsie, New York. After traveling to St. Louis for the Grant wedding, Longstreet and his wife, they moved to Carlisle Barracks, which is in Pennsylvania.
So did Grant go to his wedding? What's up?
Right. 1st of January, everybody's recovering from the hangover from the hell of a party the night before, ringing in the new year of 1850. He was appointed chief commissary for the Department of Texas. This was responsible for the acquisition and distribution of food to the department's soldiers and animals.
Oh, good. Good for you, Longstreet.
Right. The job was complex, consisted mainly of paperwork, although it did provide experience in administrative military work as well. The 1850 census records show that Longstreet owned 2 slaves, a 35-year-old woman and a 13-year-old girl. He got the daughter and the mama.
All right. In June, Longstreet, hoping for promotion and an income above his $40 per month salary to support his growing family, he requested a transfer to the cavalry, but was rejected.
Oh.
He then resigned as commissary March of 1851 and then returned to the 8th Infantry. Longstreet served on frontier duty in Texas at Fort Martin Scott near Fredericksburg. The primary purpose of this in Texas was to protect frontier communities against Indians and... so racist. Against Indians, and Longstreet frequently participated in scouting missions against the Comanche as well, those bastards.
Oh, I know, huh?
His family remained in San Antonio, and he saw them regularly.
Oh, good for him.
1854, he was then transferred. He said, you want to see your family? You go all the way to El Paso, which is 100,000 hours away.
Ridiculous.
He was transferred to Fort Bliss in El Paso, and Luis and the children, they went with him. Good for you, buddy.
Good for them, right?
How come none of these other guys was taking their family with them?
Right. Because they didn't want them there, right? 1855, Longstreet was involved in fighting against the Mescalero, which is a tribe of the Apaches in New Mexico. He assumed command of the garrison at Fort Bliss on 2... Okay, I guess that little fight didn't mean nothing, huh? He assumed command of the garrison at Fort Bliss on 2 occasions, between the spring of 1856 and the spring of 1858. The small size of the garrison allowed for easy socialization with the local people, and the fort's location allowed for visits with Louise's parents in Santa Fe. Longstreet performed scout missions.
Well, look at him. March 29th, 1858, he wrote to the Adjutant General's office in Washington. He requested that he be assigned a recruiting duty in the East, which would allow him to get some better education for his children.
Ooh.
He was granted a 6-month leave, but the request for assignment in the East was denied. And he was instead directed to serve as major and paymaster for the 8th Infantry in Leavenworth, Kansas. That's not bad. He left his son Garland in a school at Yonkers, New York, before journeying into Kansas. On the way, Longstreet came across his old friend Grant in St. Louis.
Nice.
After about a year in Leavenworth, he was transferred to Colonel Garland's department in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Albuquerque. And to there, he was going to serve as paymaster, where he was joined, yep, you guessed it, by his wife and their children.
Nice.
She's like, you're going to serve under my daddy.
Knowledge of Longstreet's pre-war life is extremely limited.
He's a private man.
His experience resembles that of many Civil War generals, insofar that as he went to West Point, he served in distinction in the war with Mexico, and he continued his career in the peacetime army of the 1850s. But beyond that, very, very little details. He left no diary. His lengthy memoirs focus almost entirely on recounting and defending his Civil War military record.
He had a lot to defend.
Yeah. They reveal little of his personal side while providing only a very cursory view of his pre-war activities. 1889 fire that destroyed personal papers.
Oh, no.
Making it so that the number of existing antebellum private letters written by Longstreet could be counted on one hand.
Oh.
That sucks.
At the beginning of the Civil War, Longstreet was paymaster for the United States Army and stationed in Albuquerque. After news of Fort Sumter, he joined his fellow Southerners in leaving the post. So I'm getting out of here, boys.
Oh, wow.
In his memoirs, Longstreet, he calls it a sad day, and records that a number of Northern officers attempted to persuade him not to go. He writes that he asked one of them what course he would pursue if his state should pass ordinances of secession and call him to its defense.
Right.
He confessed that they would obey the call.
Right. See, that's what a lot of people don't realize, too. Back then, they were more loyal to the state.
Your state was your country, man,
right.
basically.
They're more loyal to the state than the country as a whole. Longstreet was not enthusiastic about secession from the Union, but he had long been infused with the concept of states' rights and felt he could not go against his homeland. Sweet, sweet Georgia. Although he was born in South Carolina and brought up in Georgia, he offered his services to Alabama.
Hey, why not?
So that
You're not even loyal to your damn state.
Right, so that would make no sense.
Liar.
Right. Wow. Which had appointed him to West Point, and where his mother still lived. He was the senior West Point graduate from that state, which meant that he could potentially be placed in command of that state. Oh, yeah, he wanted the command of the army. Beautiful. After settling his accounts, he submitted his resignation letter from the United States Army on the 9th of May, 1861. That's after Fort Sumter.
That's a month after.
Intending to join the old Confederacy, he said, I gotta go. He had already accepted a commission as a lieutenant colonel in the Confederate States Army on the 1st of May. His resignation from the United States Army was accepted on June 1st.
I don't think he had a choice, bud.
Right. And they're like, no.
At Longstreet, he arrived in Richmond with his new commission. He then met with Confederate President Jefferson Davis at the Executive Mansion June 22nd, where he was informed that he had been appointed a brigadier general with the date rank of June 17th, a commission he accepted on June 25th. Know why it took so long?
Right.
He was ordered to report to Brigadier General P.G.T. Beauregard at Manassas, where he was given command of a brigade of 3 Virginia regiments, which were the 1st, 11th, and 17th Infantry.
Okay.
In the Confederate Army of the Potomac. Wait, what?
I think that turned into the
North Virginia?
North Virginia.
Short-lived. His only major combat was First Battle of War One. Really?
Yeah.
The Army of the Shenandoah was merged into it, and it was renamed the Army of Northern Virginia.
Longstreet assembled his staff and trained his brigade incessantly. On July 16th, 1861, Union Brigadier General Irvin McDowell began marching his army toward Manassas Junction. Little did they know of the fight they had ahead of them. Longstreet's brigade first saw action at Blackbird's Ford on July 18th, when it collided with McDowell's advance division under Brigadier General Daniel Tyler, clashing heavily with the brigade of Israel Richardson. An infantry charge pushed Longstreet's men back, and in his own words, Longstreet said, "We rode with saber in hand for the leading files, determined to give them all that was in the sword and my horse's heels, or stop the break."
Well, Colonel Jubal Early's brigade arrived to reinforce Longstreet. One of Early's regiments, the 7th Virginia, fired a volley while Longstreet was still in front of its position, forcing him to dive off his horse.
Damn.
Under the renewed Confederate strength, though, the Union left wavered. Tyler withdrew as he had orders not to bring on a general engagement anyway. This battle preceded First Bull Run, obviously, when the main attack came at the opposite end of the line, July 21st, Longstreet's brigade endured artillery fire for 9 hours, but played a minor role in the fighting.
Between 5 and 6 in that evening, Longstreet received an order from Brigadier General Joseph Johnston, instructing him to take part in the pursuit of the Federal troops, who had been defeated and were fleeing the battlefield. He obeyed, but when he met Brigadier General Millage Bonham's brigade, Bonham, who outranked Longstreet, he said, "Retreat, motherfucker." He's like, "Wait, we're supposed to follow this guy." The same order soon arrived from Johnston. Longstreet was infuriated that his commanders would not allow a vigorous pursuit of the defeated Union Army. Right? His chief of staff, Moxley Sorrell, recorded that he was in a fine rage. He dashed his hat fiercely to the ground, stamped, and bitter words escaped him. He quoted Longstreet as saying afterward, "Retreat? Hell! The Federal Army has broken to pieces."
Well, see, look at both sides could have done something.
Easily.
October 7th, Longstreet was promoted to Major General and assumed command of a division in the newly reorganized and renamed Confederate Army of Northern Virginia, which was under Johnston at this time. And where he said part of the Potomac and Shenandoah, with 4 infantry brigades commanded by Generals D.H. Hill, David Jones, Bonham, and Lewis Wigfall, as well as Hampton's Legion, commanded by Wade Hampton III. Oh, that's all his guys.
Fantastic. I love every minute of it. 10th of January, 1862. Longstreet traveled under orders from Johnson to Richmond, where he discussed with Davis the creation of a conscription program.
He said, "Boys, we need a lot more people. We got to force them to come in now."
Right. He spent much of the intervening time with Louise and their children, and was back at the Army headquarters in Centreville by January 20th. 10-day leave. That's cool. A day or two later, he received a telegram informing him that all 4 of his children were extremely sick in an outbreak of scarlet fever.
Not scarlet fever.
Oh, shit. Longstreet immediately jumped on his horse and hoofed it to the city. Longstreet arrived in Richmond before the death of his 1-year-old daughter, Mary Ann Longstreet, on the 25th of January, 1862. 4-year-old James died the following day. Oh, my goodness, dude.
Oh, no. That's not over with, because 11-year-old Augustus Baldwin, who they called Gus, died on February 1st.
Dude, you lose 3 children within a week.
His 13-year-old son, Garland, remained ill, but appeared to be out of mortal danger. George Pickett and his future wife, LaSalle Corbell, they were in the Longstreet's company throughout the affair.
Good for you, George.
They arranged the funeral and burials, which, for unknown reasons, neither Longstreet nor his wife attended.
They couldn't. How could you?
Jeez. Longstreet, he returned to Army February 5th.
Oh, shit, right away. Off, wanting to kill some bluecoats.
He rushed back to Richmond later in the month when Garland took a turn for the worse, but came back after he recovered.
Okay.
The losses were devastating for Longstreet, and he became withdrawn, and both personally and socially. Now we know why he didn't write about his life.
Right.
1861, his headquarters were noted for parties, drinking, and poker games.
I bet they were.
Off the rails now.
Yeah.
Dude, you got 6 more kids, dude.
Holy, I know, right?
After he returned, the headquarters' social life became for a time more somber, though.
Oh, wow.
He rarely drank, which is surprising, and his religious devotion increased. Oh.
Well, that spring, Union Major General George McClellan, commander of the Army of Potomac, launched a peninsula campaign intending to capture the Confederate capital of Richmond.
Yeah, he intended to.
Right. In his memoirs, Longstreet wrote that while in temporary command of the Confederate Army, he proposed to Thomas Stonewall Jackson that he march to Jackson in the Shenandoah Valley and combine forces. No evidence has emerged for this claim.
Okay. Following the delay of the Union offensive against the Richmond at the Siege of Yorktown, Johnson oversaw a tactical withdrawal to the outskirts of Richmond, where defenses had already been prepared. Longstreet's division formed the rear guard, which was heavily engaged at the Battle of Williamsburg May 5th. There, Union troops, beginning with Joseph Hooker's division of the 3rd Corps, which was Union, by the way, which was commanded by Samuel Henselman. They came out of a forest into open ground to attack Longstreet's men.
Oh, that's nice.
Open ground, that's where the Union wants to be.
Right. To protect the Army supply wagons, Longstreet counterattacked with the brigades of Cadmus Wilcox, A.P. Hill, George Pickett, Raleigh Colston, and 2 other regiments. The assault drove the Union soldiers back, finding the ground he occupied untenable. Longstreet requested reinforcements from D.H. Hill's division. A little further up the road they were. and received Early's brigade, to which was later added to the entire division. Oh, that's nice. Old Juba Early then launched a fruitless and bloody attack well after the wagons had already been safely evacuated. Overall, the battle was a success, protecting the passage of the Confederate supply wagons, delaying the advance of McClellan's army towards Richmond. Good for you. The affair gave the Confederates possession of 4 cannons. McClellan inaccurately characterized the battle as a Union victory in a dispatch to Washington.
That's because we already done McClellan. We know that guy. May 31st, during the Battle of Seven Pines, Longstreet received his orders verbally from Johnson, but apparently misremembered them. He marched his men in the wrong direction down the wrong road, causing congestion and confusion with the other Confederate units, and diluted the effect of the Confederate counterattack against McClellan.
Oh, shit. What are you doing, Longstreet?
Jeez. He then got into an argument with Major General Benjamin Huger over who had seniority, causing a significant delay.
Oh, wow.
When D.H. Hill subsequently asked Longstreet for reinforcements, he complied, but failed to properly coordinate his brigades. Only one of Longstreet's brigades and none of Huger's reached the field.
Oh, wow. Uh-oh, what's going on here? Late in the day, Major General Edwin Vos Sumner crossed the rain-swollen Chickamauga River with 2 divisions he had. General Johnson wounded during this very battle. Although Johnson preferred Longstreet as his replacement, command of the Army of Northern Virginia shifted to G.W. Smith, the senior major general. Only for one day, though, because on June 1st, Richardson's division of Sumner's Corps engaged Longstreet's men, routing Louis Armistead's brigade. But the brigades of Pickett, William Mahone, and Roger Addison Pryor, positioned in the woods, managed to hold it back. Good for you.
That was after 6 hours of fighting. The battle ended in a draw. Johnson praised Longstreet's performance in the battle, and biographer William Garrett Piston calls it the lowest point in Longstreet's military career.
Oh, wow.
Longstreet's report unfairly blamed Huger for the mishaps, of course. June 1st, the president's military advisor, Robert E. Lee, he assumed command of the Army of Northern Virginia. And in his memoirs, Longstreet suggested that he initially doubted Lee's capacity for command. He wrote that his arrival was, quote-unquote, far from reconciling the troops to the loss of our beloved chief, Joseph Johnston. He wrote that Lee did not have much of a reputation at the time that he took command, and there were therefore misgivings about Lee's power and skill for field service.
Uh-oh.
Right, he's not tested.
Wow. In late June, Lee organized a plan to drive McClellan's army away from the capital, which culminated in the 7-day battles. At daybreak, 27th of June, at Gaines Mill, the old rabbit army attacked the 5th Corps of the Bluecoats under Brigadier General John Porter, which was positioned north of the Chickamauga River on McClellan's right flank. The Bluecoats held their lines for most of the day against attacks from the divisions A.B. Hill and D.H. Hill, and Jackson did not arrive until that afternoon. At about 5 p.m., Longstreet received orders from Lee to join this very battle.
Longstreet's fresh brigades under Pickett and Richard Anderson, accompanied by the brigades of Brigadier General John Bell Hood and Colonel Evander Law from William Whiting's division, they charged the Union lines, forcing them to retreat across the Chickamauga. Longstreet was engaged again on June 30th with about 20,000 men at Glendale.
Nice.
He departed from his usual strategy of placing troops several lines deep and instead spread them out, which, in the opinion of some military historians, cost him that battle.
His efforts were further damaged by the slowness of other Confederate commanders. McClellan was able to withdraw his army to the high plateau of Malvern Hill. Jackson engaged at White Oak Swamp, ignored reports of ways in which to cross the swamp, and he refused to answer an inquiry from Longstreet's staff officer, John Fairfax. Huger's advance was slow enough to allow federal troops to be transported away from the guarding him and towards Longstreet, and Theophilus Holmes also performed poorly. Nearly 50,000 Confederate troops stood within a few miles of the field at Glendale and rendered little to no assistance. That's sad.
In a reconnaissance of the evening, June 30th, Longstreet reported to Lee that conditions were favorable enough to justify the assault. At the Battle of Malvern Hill the next day, Longstreet surrendered A.P. Hill's entire division to John Magruder and marched his remaining troops toward the Union positions on the Confederate extreme right. His men were exposed to fire on their flanks from McClellan's troops and were forced to withdraw without success. Throughout the battles of the 7 days, Longstreet had operational command of nearly half of Lee's army, which was 15 brigades, as it drove McClellan back down the peninsula.
Wow, Longstreet performed aggressively and quite well in his new, larger command, particularly at Gaines Mills and Glendale. Lee's army suffered from poor maps, organizational flaws, and weak performances by Longstreet's peers, including, uncharacteristically, Stonewall Jackson.
Yep.
And it was unable to destroy the Union Army. Moxley Sorrell wrote of Longstreet's confidence and calmness in the battle. He was like a rock in steady. All right. He was like a rock in steadiness when sometimes in battle the world seemed flying to pieces. Lee, he said shortly after 7 days, Longstreet was a staff in my right hand.
I'm just thinking Lee just says this about anybody now. He had been established as Lee's principal lieutenant. Lee reorganized the Army of Northern Virginia after 7 days battles, increasing Longstreet's command from 6 to 28 brigade. Longstreet took command of the right wing, later known as the First Corps, and Jackson was given command of the left wing.
All right.
Over time, Lee and Longstreet became good friends and set up headquarters very near each other.
Oh, nice. Where you putting your tent? They go over here.
Despite sharing with Jackson a belief in temperance as well as deep religious conviction, Lee never developed a strong friendship with him.
Wow. With Jackson?
Is that with Jackson?
Yeah.
He never developed a strong friendship, but he knew this dude was his best guy.
Right.
Piston speculates that the more relaxed atmosphere of Longstreet's headquarters, which included gambling and drinking, allowed Lee to relax and take his mind off the war, and reminded him of his happier younger days. Right, man. You don't want to be like,
right.
Yeah, just fucking kick it back and
relax.
Have a whiskey or two.
Fantastic. After the campaign, an editorial appeared in the Richmond Examiner, which inaccurately claimed that the Battle of Glendale was fought exclusively by General A.P. Hill and the forces under his command. Longstreet was pissed, so he drafted a letter refuting the article, which was published in the the Richmond Rig, not even the Examiner.
Right.
Hill took offense and requested that his division be transferred out of Longstreet's command. But Lee was like, calm down, motherfuckers, you both staying. Then Hill refused to even accede to Longstreet's repeated requests for information and was eventually arrested on Longstreet's orders. This is who? D.H. A.P. Hill, really?
Mm-hmm. I remember A.P. and D.H. didn't get along either.
All right. He challenged Longstreet to a duel. Oh. Longstreet said, hell yeah. Lee said, no. I'm going to transfer Hill into Jackson's command.
All right, yeah.
No, hold on.
Come on, boys. The military reputation of Lee's corps commanders are often characterized as Stonewall Jackson representing the audacious, offensive component of Lee's army, with Longstreet more typically advocating and executing strong defensive strategies and tactics.
Right.
Wirt, the historian, describes Jackson as the hammer and Longstreet as the anvil.
Nice.
In the first part of the Northern Virginia campaign of August 6, 1862, this stereotype held true, but in the climactic battle it did not.
Oh.
In June, the federal government created the 50,000-strong Army of Virginia and put Major General John Pope in command.
Sure did. Oh, John Pope. Well, Pope, he moved south in an attempt to attack Lee and threaten Richmond once again through an overland march. Lee left Longstreet near Richmond to guard the city and dispatched Jackson to hinder Pope's advance. Jackson won a major victory at the Battle of Cedar Mountain. After learning that McClellan, as ordered, had dispatched troops north to assist Pope, Lee said, Longstreet, you move north, bud, leaving only 3 divisions under G.W. Smith to protect Richmond against McClellan's reduced force.
Oh. Longstreet's men began their march August 17th, aided by Stuart's cavalry. August 23rd, Longstreet engaged Pope's position in a minor artillery duel at the First Battle of the Rappahannock Station. The Confederate Washington artillery was heavily damaged, and a Union shell landed feet away from Longstreet and Wilcox, but failed to explode.
Oh.
Probably could have been dead.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, Stuart's cavalry rode around the Army of Virginia and captured hundreds of soldiers and horses, as well as some of Pope's personal belongings.
Oh, we got the personal belongings.
Jackson executed a sweeping flanking maneuver that captured Pope's main supply depot as well.
He then placed his corps near the rear of Pope's army, but he then took up a defensive position and effectively invited Pope to assault him.
I hereby invite you to assault me.
You are formally invited to an assault tonight. Bring your own fist.
BYOF.
On the 28th of August and the 29th, the start of the Second Battle of Bull Run began.
Yes.
Pope pounded Jackson as Longstreet and the remainder of the army marched from the west through Thoroughfare Gap to reach the battlefield. On the afternoon of the 28th, Longstreet engaged a 5,000-man federal division under James Ricketts at the Battle of Thoroughfare Gap. Ricketts had been ordered to delay Longstreet's march toward the main Confederate army.
He did that.
But he took up his position way too late.
Didn't do that.
Allowing George Anderson's brigade to occupy the high ground.
Oh, bud, can't do that.
They probably would have won that battle if they would have done that.
Well, Lee and Longstreet watched the battle together and decided to flank the Union position. Hood's division and a brigade under Henry Benning, they advanced towards the gap from the north and the south, respectively. While Wilcox's division followed in a 6-mile march northward. Ricketts, he realized his position was untenable and withdrew that evening, allowing Longstreet to join up with the rest of Lee's army. Post-war criticism of Longstreet claimed that he marched his men too slowly, leaving Jackson to bear the brunt of the fighting for 2 days. But they covered roughly 30 miles an hour. But they covered roughly 30 miles in a little over 24 hours. And Lee did not attempt to get his army concentrated any faster either.
Right. When Longstreet's men arrived on the field around midday, 29th of August, Lee planned a flanking attack on the Union Army, which at this point is concentrating its attention on Jackson. So Longstreet demurred to 3 suggestions from Lee, urging him to attack, recommending instead of a reconnaissance, and forced to survey the ground in front of him. This confirmed the presence of Porter's 5th Corps in front of his lines. By 6:30 p.m., Hood's division moved forward against Porter and drove back the soldiers it encountered. But it had to be withdrawn at night when it advanced too far ahead of the main lines.
Despite the smashing victory that followed, Longstreet, he was eventually criticized for allegedly being slow, reluctant to attack, and disobedient to General Lee. Lee's biographer, Douglas Southall Freeman, he wrote, "The seeds of much of the disaster at Gettysburg were sown in that instant when Lee yielded to Longstreet, and Longstreet discovered that he would." Longstreet's like, yeah, all right. Wirt, on the other hand, he disputes this conclusion, pointing out that in a post-war letter to Longstreet, Porter told him that had he attacked him that day, Longstreet's loss would have been enormous.
Yeah, of course it would have. It would have been bad.
Defending old Longstreet, are you, Porter?
Despite this criticism, the following day was, according to Wirt, one of Longstreet's finest performances of the war. After his attacks on the 29th, Pope came to believe with little evidence that Jackson was in retreat. He ordered a reluctant Porter to pursue, and his corps collided with Jackson's men and suffered heavy casualties. The attack exposed the Union left flank. Longstreet took advantage of this. He launched a massive assault on the Union flank with over 25,000 men. For over 4 hours, they pounded like a giant hammer, with Longstreet actively directing artillery fire and sending brigades into the fray. Longstreet and Lee were together during the assault, and both of them came under Union artillery fire.
Well, although the Union troops put up a furious defense, Pope's army was forced to retreat in a manner similar to the embarrassing Union defeat at the first Bull Run, which was obviously on the roughly the same battleground. Longstreet gave the credit to Lee for the victory, describing the campaign as clever and brilliant. Brilliant!
Nice.
It established a strategic model he believed to be ideal, which was the use of defensive tactics within a strategic offensive.
Right.
September 1st, Jackson's corps moved to cut off the Union retreat of the Battle of Chantilly. Longstreet's men remained on the field to fool Pope into thinking that Lee's entire army was still on his front.
After the old rebel success at 2nd Manassas, Lee, holding the strategic initiative, decided to take the war to Maryland to relieve Virginia and hopefully induce foreign nations to come to the Confederates' aid. He wanted them, but they weren't coming. They almost did. Longstreet supported this plan. The situation called for action, he said, and there was but one opening across the Potomac. His men, well, they crossed into Maryland on the 6th of September and arrived in Frederick the following day, beginning the Maryland campaign. At the Battle of Antietam, or Sharpsburg, on the 17th of September, rather than commit his forces all at once, McClellan made a series of partial attacks on the old Confederate troops at different places throughout the day, while holding many of his troops, including the entire 5th Corps in reserve. Yeah, McClellan was... I don't get it.
Well, at dawn, Hood's division on the Confederate left was driven back by an assault by Hooker's and Joseph K. Mansfield's corps until reinforced by men from Jackson's command. More troops from both sides soon poured into the fighting, which raged for 3 hours. At the center of the field, D.H. Hill's division defended a 600-yard position dominated by a sunken wagon path. The position was naturally strong, made more so by the piling of planks from a wooden fence at the top of the ditch and Hill's men firmly repulsed 2 successive charges from the divisions of William, French, and Richardson. Yeah, they slaughtered these guys, dude.
Did. Well, Hill did suffer significant casualties, though, and Longstreet sent R.H. Anderson's division, which consisted of 3,500 men, to go reinforce Hill. Anderson was wounded and replaced by Pryor. At Pryor's request, Longstreet sent artillery support in response to Union cannon being fired at the old rebels in the road from across Antietam Creek. He also ordered a flanking movement by about 900 soldiers in several regiments, led by Colonel John Rogers Cook. Union troops arrested Cook's advance. An intense fight followed. Cook withdrew after his ammo was expended. A mistaken order allowed Union troops to breach the Confederate position at the sunken road, but the old Rebs' lines, they were stabilized.
At this point in the afternoon, fighting largely ceased except for on the Confederate right. The Union left wing under Major General Ambrose Burnside attempted to cross the Antietam Creek at what would become known as Burnside's Bridge, while Jones's division, led by Brigadier General Robert Toombs's brigade, defended the heights on the western side of the creek. For hours, the Union troops tried to cross the river and failed 5 times. Finally, about 4 p.m., a flanking maneuver forced Toombs to withdraw. After the further engagement, the remainder of Jones's division was forced to give way, and Burnside's men occupied the crest overlooking the river before pressing their advantage.
Their progress was arrested by the arrival of A.P. Hill's division under Jackson from Harper's Ferry. Fighting ensued in the town of Sharpsburg until Burnside withdrew his men at dusk. The old Rebs pursued their enemy, but stopped once the retreating troops came under the protection of a battery on the opposite side of the river, ending the Battle of Antietam after 18 hours of fighting. At the end of that bloodiest day of the Civil War, Lee greeted his subordinate by saying, "Ha! Here's Longstreet. Here's my old war horse."
Oh, they love each other. Lee held his ground at Antietam until the evening of September 18th, when he withdrew his army from the battlefield and took it back across the Potomac into Virginia. October 9th, a few weeks after, Longstreet, he was promoted lieutenant general. Nice. Lee, he arranged for Longstreet's promotion to be dated 1 day earlier than Jackson's, making the old war horse the senior lieutenant general in the Army of Northern Virginia. Look at that. Wow. In an army reorganization in November, Longstreet's command was designated the First Corps, Jackson's the Second. The First Corps consisted of 5 divisions, which is about 41,000 men.
Damn.
Which the divisions were commanded by Lafayette McLaws, R.H. Anderson, Hood, Pickett, and Robert Ransom Jr.
Oh, fantastic. After a lengthy interlude with little military activity, beginning on 26th of October, McClellan marched his army across the Potomac again. On the 7th of November, Lincoln replaced McClellan with Burnside. On the 15th of November, Burnside began moving his army south towards Fredericksburg, Virginia, midway between the opposing capitals. On the 18th of November, Longstreet began marching his men out of the Army headquarters in Culpeper towards Fredericksburg, where the Confederate Army would make its stand against Burnside. Since Lee moved Longstreet to Fredericksburg early, it allowed Longstreet to build strong defenses.
It should. Longstreet, he ordered trenches, abatis, and field works to be constructed south of the town along a stone wall at the foot of Mary's Heights. After a lengthy delay caused by waiting for the arrival of supplies to build pontoon bridges, Burnside, he attempted to cross the Rappahannock December 11th. Soldiers attempting to lay pontoon bridges encountered fierce resistance from Confederate troops inside Fredericksburg, which was led by William Barksdale's brigade of McLaws' division. Burnside, he subsequently ordered an artillery bombardment of the town, and by the following day he had moved his army across and occupied Fredericksburg. December 12th saw only a little bit of desultory fighting.
Longstreet, he had his men firmly entrenched. On the 13th of December, on Burnside's orders, troops from the Union Right Grand Division under Sumner and the Center Grand Division under Hooker undertook to carry the position held by Longstreet's troops, who, contrary to some of their expectations, found themselves at the center of the battle.
We weren't supposed to be doing this.
The very first blue coat assault on Longstreet's men at Mary's Heights was a disastrous failure, causing approximately 1,000 casualties within 30 minutes.
When Lee expressed apprehension at the Federal troops that they might overrun Longstreet's men, Longstreet replied that as long as he had sufficient ammo, he would kill them all before any of them reached his line. He advised him to look towards Jackson's more tenuous position on the right. So go over there and mess with him. Longstreet, he was proven correct, as from their strong position, his troops easily repulsed several assaults.
Damn.
In some places behind the stone wall, Confederate ranks were 4 to 5 troops deep.
Nice.
Soldiers in the rear loaded rifles, passed them up front so that the fire was virtually continuous. Nice. It's like an assembly line of fire, dude.
Hell yeah. Oh, rebel troops were well protected, although they did suffer one notable casualty when Brigadier General Thomas Reed Roots Cobb, who commanded a brigade in McLaw's division that was positioned at the front of the stone wall, moited.
Yeah, what are you going to do?
One Union general compared the scene before Mary's Heights to a great slaughter pen and said that his men might as well have tried to take hell. McLaw's estimated that only one Union soldier lay dead within 30 yards of the wall, the rest having fallen much farther back. Wow. Jackson, meanwhile, managed with much greater difficulty to repel a strong Union assault spearheaded by the division of George Meade. Yeah. Longstreet was like, hey, bud, Jackson needs help over there.
Well, sensing that the rest of his troops would be adequate to defend his position on the Confederate left on the heights, Longstreet, he had ordered Hood to reinforce Jackson and Pickett to cooperate with him, but Hood hesitated in sending his division forward, and by the time he did, the fighting on Jackson's front had mostly ended anyway. Longstreet expressed regret after the war for not bringing the delinquent Hood to trial. Burnside intended to attack again the next day, but several of his officers, particularly Sumner, they advised against it, and so they entrenched and withdrew on December 15th instead.
In Longstreet's report, he praised his men and officers while asking them to contribute money for the residents of Fredericksburg. Lee's report strongly commended Jackson and Longstreet. Burnside's army had suffered 12,653 casualties at Fredericksburg. About 70% of them were in front of Mary's Heights. Whew. Lee suffered only 5,300 losses, about 1,900 of which came from Longstreet. Lieutenant Colonel Edward Porter Alexander of the artillery described Fredericksburg as the easiest battle we ever fought.
Wow.
Damn.
October 1862, Longstreet had suggested to Joe Johnston that he be sent to fight the war in Western Theater. Shortly after Fredericksburg, Longstreet vaguely suggested to Lee that one corps could hold the line of the Rappahannock while the other was operating elsewhere. February of 1863, he made a more specific request, this time suggesting to Wigfall that his corps be detached from the Army of Northern Virginia and sent to reinforce the Army of Tennessee, where Braxton Bragg was being challenged by the Army of the Cumberland under Major General William Rosecrans, who happened to be Longstreet's roommate at West Point.
Oh, fantastic.
That's probably why he wanted to go there. He's like, see what you got, old Willie.
Wow. By this time, Longstreet could be identified as part of a Western concentration bloc, which believed that reinforcing Confederate armies operating in the Western Theater to protect the states in that part of the Confederacy from invasion was more important than offensive campaigns in the Eastern Theater. I believe so, because you see what happened. Motherfuckers came in from the West.
As soon as that West was gone, man, then you got everybody just focusing on the East.
This group also included Johnston and Lewis Wigfall, now a Confederate senator, both of whom Longstreet was very, very close with. These people were generally cautious and believed that the old Confederacy, with its limited resources, should engage in a defensive rather than offensive war. I don't know, man. You guys are the one trying to leave.
Right.
Lee did detach 2 divisions from the First Corps, but ordered them to Richmond, not Tennessee.
Well, the Confederate Army was suffering from an acute food shortage, obviously. Southern Virginia was said to have large quantities of cattle and substantial stores of bacon and corn. Meanwhile, seaborne movements of the Union Ninth Corps, they were thought to be aimed at launching an invasion of the Confederate coast anywhere from South Carolina up to Southern Virginia. In response, Lee ordered Pickett's division to the capital in mid-February. Hood's division followed. Then Longstreet himself was told to take command of the detached divisions and the departments of North Carolina and Southern Virginia. The division of McLaws and Anderson, they remained with Lee.
Okay.
Said, you guys go defend the capital, we'll stay out here.
Right. In March, Longstreet's men primarily conducted foraging expeditions in Virginia and North Carolina. Longstreet sent Brigadier General Richard Garnett's brigade to D.H. Hill to participate in Hill's attempt to capture New Bern, which was a town on the North Carolina coast, which had fallen to the Union in March of 1862. The campaign was unsuccessful, but netted a considerable amount of supplies. In April, Longstreet besieged Union forces in the city of Suffolk, which is in Virginia. Fighting was light. Nothing came of the siege. At the end of April, Longstreet was ordered by Secretary of War James Seddon to join Lee's army as it faced attack from the Army of Potomac, now commanded by Hooker at the Battle of Chancellorsville. And this one all starts going down hizzles.
He indeed moved his divisions north, but could not reach the battle in time. Longstreet's foraging operations yielded enough food to feed Lee's entire army for 2 months. Nice. However, no further military objective was reached. and the operation caused Longstreet and 15,000 men of the First Corps to be absent from Chancellorsville. That could have helped out. Eventually, Longstreet came under criticism from political enemies, claiming that he could have marched his men back from Suffolk in time.
Oh, sure.
However, Sorrell, he says that it was humanly impossible for the men to move any faster than what they were.
I'd like to see these critics do these marches themselves.
It's all fun and games till you got to get out there and do it.
Following Chancellorsville and the death of old Stonewall Jackson, Longstreet and Lee met in mid-May to discuss the Army's summer campaign, which wasn't going to look too well either. Longstreet once more pushed for the detachment of all or part of his corps to be sent to Tennessee. Justification for this course of action was becoming more urgent as Union Major General Ulysses S. Grant was advancing on a critical Confederate stronghold on the Mississippi River in Vicksburg. Longstreet argued that a reinforced army under Bragg could defeat Rosecrans and drive toward the Ohio River, which would compel Grant to break his hold on Vicksburg, which I probably would have. And then you wouldn't have the defeat at Vicksburg. You probably still would have had Gettysburg.
Maybe. Well, he advanced these views during a meeting with Seddon, who approved of the idea but doubted that Lee would, and opined that Davis would be unlikely to go against Lee's wishes too. Which, yeah. Longstreet had criticized Bragg's generalship and may have been hoping to replace him, although he also might have wished to see Joseph Johnston take command, indicated that he would be content to serve under him as corps commander.
Okay.
Yeah, they hated Bragg and Hood, dude.
Right. Well, Lee, once again, didn't like the idea, and he prevented this idea by telling Davis that parting with large numbers of troops would force him to move his army closer to Richmond, and instead advanced a plan to invade Pennsylvania.
Oh, shouldn't have done that, buddy.
A campaign in the North would relieve agricultural military pressure that the war was placing on Virginia and North Carolina, and by threatening a federal city, disrupt Union offensive elsewhere and erode support for the war among Northern civilians. It didn't work all that way.
No. In his memoirs, Longstreet described his reaction to Lee's proposal. He said, his plan or wishes announced, it became useless and improper to offer suggestions leading to a different course. All that I could ask was that the policy of the campaign should be one of defensive tactics, that we should work so as to force the enemy to attack us in such good position as we might find in our own country, so well adapted to that purpose, which might assure us of a grand triumph. To this, he readily assented as an important and material adjunct to his general plan.
Okay.
So he wanted to stay in their own territory and not even attack.
No, I would not leave it there. There's conflicting evidence for the veracity of Longstreet's account, though. It was written years after the campaign, and is affected by hindsight, both of the results of the battle and of heavy postbellum criticism.
Yeah.
In letters of the time, Longstreet made no reference to such a bargain. April of 1868, Lee said that he had never made any such promise and had never thought of doing any such thing. Yet, in his post-battle report, Lee wrote, it had not been intended to fight a general battle at such a distance from our base, unless attacked by the enemy.
Well, so he's lying.
Right.
Saving face. The Army of Northern Virginia was reorganized after Jackson's death, clearly. 2 division commanders, Richard Ewell and A.P. Hill, they were promoted to lieutenant general, and they assumed command of the 2nd and the newly created 3rd Corps, respectively. Longstreet's 1st Corps gave up R.H. Anderson's division during the reorganization, which left Longstreet with the divisions of Hood, McLaws, and Pickett.
Uh-oh.
He's like, these guys.
After determining that an advance north was inevitable, Longstreet dispatched the scout Henry Thomas Harrison, whom he had met during the Suffolk campaign. He said, go gather some info for me, bud. He paid Harrison in gold and told him that he did not care to see him till he could bring information of importance. Ewell's corps led the army north, followed by Longstreet's and then Hill. The 1st Corps crossed the Potomac River on June 25th through the 26th.
Harrison, then he came back and reported to Longstreet on the evening of the 28th, and he was instrumental in warning the Confederates that the Army of the Potomac was advancing north to meet them more quickly than they had anticipated, and was already gathered around Frederick, Maryland. Lee, he was initially skeptical, but the report prompted him to order the immediate concentration of his army north of Frederick near Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. Harrison also brought news that Hooker had been replaced as commander of the Army of the Potomac by Meade.
Hey.
And this is probably what they didn't want, because they've already faced Meade
Yep.
separately and beat their asses.
Longstreet's actions at the Battle of Gettysburg will become the centerpiece of lasting controversy.
Yeah.
He arrived on the battlefield at about 4:30 p.m. on the first day, which was July 1st, 1863, hours ahead of his troops. Lee had not intended to fight before his army was fully concentrated, but chance and decisions by A.P. Hill, whose troops were the first to be engaged, brought on a confrontation. The battle on the very first day was a strong Confederate victory. 2 Union corps had been driven by Ewell and Hill from the positions north of Gettysburg back through the town into the defensive positions on the heights to the south.
That's the way it always worked out in these bigger battles. The Confederates usually got day one, and then it just went downhill from there.
Downhill.
Meeting with Lee, Longstreet was concerned about the strength of the Union defensive position on elevated ground and advocated a strategic movement around their left flank to secure good ground between him and his capital, which would presumably compel Meade to attack defensive positions erected by the Confederates. Instead, Lee exclaimed, "If the enemy is there tomorrow, I will attack him." Longstreet replied, "If he is there tomorrow, it is because he wants you to attack."
All right.
Lee, energized by the success of his army that day, he refused. Nothing can stop us now.
Right.
Lee seems a little hard-headed and stubborn there, huh?
Well, Longstreet, he was like, well, if we're going to do that, why don't we do an immediate assault on the Federal positions? But Lee once again insisted on waiting for Hood and McLaws, who were marching towards Gettysburg on the Chambersburg Pike.
Giving the Union time to set up their shit, man.
Longstreet sent a courier down the Cashtown Road to hurry them along.
Come on, get you guys' ass up here.
They eventually hunkered down about 4 miles behind the lines. Pickett, he was performing rearguard duty in Cashtown and would not be ready to move until morning. A major blunder occurred when Ewell failed to seize the heights of Cemetery Hill after being ordered to do so, if practicable.
And it was.
It was. You couldn't do it. Which over Pickett, because then Pickett got, shit.
Lee's plan for the second called for Longstreet to attack the Union's left flank, which was to be followed by Hill's attack on Cemetery Ridge near the center. Ewell, he was demonstrated on the Union right. Longstreet again argued for a flanking maneuver around the left of the Union, but Lee rejected his plan. Longstreet was not ready to attack as early as Lee envisioned. He received permission from Lee to wait for Law's brigade of Hood's division to reach the field before advancing. Law marched his men quickly, covering 28 miles in 11 hours, but didn't even arrive till noon anyways.
Jeez.
28 miles in 11 hours?
3 of Longstreet's brigades were still in march column, some distance from their designated positions. Longstreet's soldiers were forced to take a long detour while approaching the enemy position.
Construction barrels everywhere.
Right. Misled by inadequate reconnaissance that failed to identify a completely concealed route. Damn. Postbellum criticism, Longstreet claims that he was ordered by Lee to attack in the early morning and that his delays were a significant contributor to the loss of the battle. Early and William Pendleton testified that Lee had ordered Longstreet to attack at sunrise and that Longstreet disobeyed.
Oh, wow. Well, this claim was factually untrue and denied by Lee's staff officers Walter Taylor and Charles Marshall. Lee, he agreed to the delays for arriving troops, and he did not issue his formal order to attack until 11 a.m. Longstreet did not aggressively pursue Lee's orders to launch an attack either, though. Sorrow, he writes that Longstreet, unenthusiastic about the attack, he displayed lethargy in bringing his troops forward. He said, well, whatever. While Lee expected an attack around noon, Longstreet, he wasn't even ready till 4.
Damn.
Meade, he used that time, like I said, to bring more of his troops forward and just get his shit built up, man.
Dumb. Wow. Campaign historian Edwin Coddington presents the approach to the federal positions as a comedy of errors, such as one might expect of inexperienced commanders and raw militia, but not of Lee's warhorse and his veteran troops.
Oh, wow.
Hood opposed an attack on the Union left, arguing that the Union position was too strong, and proposed that his troops be moved to the right, near Big Round Top, and hit the Union in the rear. Longstreet insisted that Lee had rejected this plan and ordered him to make the assault against the front of the enemy lines. Once the assault began at around 4 p.m., Longstreet pressed McLaws and Hood strongly against heavy Union resistance.
Well, Longstreet, he personally led the attack on horseback. Union Major General Daniel Sickles, this guy, commanding the 3rd Corps, had, contrary to Meade's orders, he marched his men to the Peach Orchard, an exposed position well in front of the main Union line.
Oh, wow.
R.H. Anderson's division of Hill's Corps alongside McLaw's division and part of the division of Hood, they launched a ferocious assault against Sickles with heavy artillery, which, after extremely intense fighting, pushed his corps back to the main Union lines. The Confederates, they were eventually repulsed after encountering fierce resistance from the old Bluecoats.
Oh. General Hood, he was wounded and replaced in command by his division by Law. Brigade commanders Barksdale and Paul Jones Sims, both under McLaws, were mortally wounded themselves. Law's brigade attempted to carry Little Round Top, which was a hill on the far left of the Union line. The hill had originally been without troops before Union Brigadier General Gouverneur Warren, Chief of Engineers, he took advantage of the Confederate delay. He sent soldiers from the 5th Corps to fortify that.
He said, look at that hill right there. There's nobody there. We should probably go get it.
Rebel troops took the part of the hill known as Devil's Den, but were unable to drive off Union forces at the top of the hill. Yeah, they got massacred.
They're on the top.
Massacred from there and on out.
The attacks had failed, and Longstreet's corps suffered more than 4,000 casualties. Contributing to Longstreet's failure was the fact that his attacks did not occur simultaneously with those of A.P. Hill and Ewell. A large portion of Hill's and Ewell's corps, including soldiers who had seen significant action the day before, they were unengaged, and Meade was able to shift Thomas Ruger's division from Ewell's front to oppose Longstreet.
Oh, wow. On the night of the 2nd of July, 1863, Longstreet did not follow his usual custom meeting Lee at his headquarters to discuss the day's battle, claiming that he was too fatigued. Instead, he spent part of the night planning for a movement around Big Round Top that would allow him to attack the enemy's flank and the rear. Longstreet, despite his use of scouting parties, was apparently unaware that a considerable body of troops from the Union 6th Corps under John Sedgwick was in position to block this very move. Shortly after issuing orders for the attack, around sunrise, Longstreet was joined at his headquarters by Lee, who was dismayed at his turn of events.
The commanding general had intended for Longstreet to attack the Union left early in the morning in a manner similar to July 2nd, using Pickett's newly arrived division, in concert with a resumed attack by Ewell on Culp's Hill. What Lee found was that no one had ordered Pickett's division forward from its camp in the rear, and that Longstreet had been planning an independent operation without consulting him. Oh, no. Yeah. Lee wrote in his after-battle report that Longstreet's dispositions were not completed as early as we expected.
Oh.
Well, your old war horse has got to get taken to the back and get put down.
Right. Well, since his plans for an early morning coordinated attack were now infeasible, Lee instead ordered Longstreet to coordinate a massive assault on the center of the Union line. He go, all right, you want to crown? You hit him right in the dead middle, buddy.
And it never works.
Right. Because you got to hit him in the center line at Cemetery Ridge. The Union position was held by the 2nd Corps under Winfield Scott Hancock. Longstreet strongly felt that this assault had little chance of success and shared his concerns with Lee. The old Rebs would have to march over close to 1 mile of open ground and negotiate sturdy fences under fire, and that is that famous scene that you guys seen in Gettysburg.
Oh, jeez. Longstreet urged Lee not to use his entire corps in the attack, arguing that the divisions of Law and McLaws, they were tired from the previous day, and that shifting them away from their positions would dangerously expose the Confederate right flank. Lee conceded and instead decided to use men from A.P. Hill's corps to accompany Pickett. The force would include about 14,000 to 15,000 men. Longstreet again told Lee he believed the attack would fail. It's not going to work, man.
Well,
you never attack the freaking middle, dude.
Stubborn old Lee did not change his mind. Longstreet relented.
Well,
the final plan called for an artillery barrage by 170 cannon under Alexander. Then the 3 brigades under Pickett and the 4 brigades in the division of Henry Heth, temporarily commanded by Brigadier General J. Johnston Pettigrew, the position to Pickett's left, would lead the attack. 2 brigades from William Dorsey Pender's division, temporarily commanded by Brigadier General Isaac Trimble, would fill in as support behind old Pettigrew. 2 brigades from R.H. Anderson's division were to support Pickett's right flank.
All right. Despite his vocal disapproval of the plan, and although most of the units came from A.P. Hill's corps, Lee designated Longstreet to lead the attack.
I bet he did. He was pissed.
All right. Longstreet dutifully saw to the position of Pickett's men. General Pickett, he placed the brigades of Garnett and Brigadier General James Kemper in front, with Armistead behind them in support. However, Longstreet neglected to adequately check on Pettigrew's division. Pettigrew had never commanded a division before, and the division which he had just been appointed to lead had suffered about a third of its casualties on a third of its army in casualties in the fighting on July 1st. Oh, man.
Yeah.
Everything just spells out disaster. Listen to your heart.
Right. His men were positioned behind Pickett's lines, leaving Pickett vulnerable.
Jeez.
And the troops on his far left were dangerously exposed. Longstreet and Hill still had a tense relationship, which made it play a role in Longstreet not carefully overseeing Hill's troops. Hill was with Lee and Longstreet throughout much of the morning, but wrote after the battle that he had ordered his men to report to Longstreet, implying that he felt that he was not responsible for arranging them.
Jeez.
Oh, wow.
During preparations for the attack, Longstreet began to agonize over the assault. He attempted to pass the responsibility for launching Pickett's division to Alexander. The artillery bombardment began about 1 p.m. Union batteries responded, and the two sides fired back and forth for about an hour and 45 minutes. Or 40 minutes. When the time came to actually order Pickett forward, Longstreet, he could only nod, unable to verbalize the order, thus beginning the assault known as Pickett's Charge. He couldn't even say nothing. He's just like, I guess, bud.
It's not good.
Beginning about 3 p.m., Confederate troops marched towards the Union positions.
As Longstreet had anticipated, the attack was a complete disaster. The assaulting units suffered massive casualties. Pettigrew and Trimble were wounded. Pickett's first two brigades severely mauled. Kemper was wounded. Garnett dead.
Wow.
Armistead's brigade briefly breached the stone wall that marked Hancock's lines, where Armistead fell mortally wounded, but the brigade was repulsed. To his men, Lee said, "It is all my fault." According to two of Longstreet's staff officers, Lee subsequently expressed regret for not taking Longstreet's advice, who has been his old war horse, and he was right all along about every other part. On the 4th of July, the Confederate Army began its retreat from Gettysburg, having their asses handed to them. Hampered by rain, the bulk of the army finally made it across the Potomac River on the night of the 13th or in the morning of the 14th of July.
Jeez.
They got their ass handed to them.
Well, fast forward to August 1863, Longstreet, he said, "I really want to go to this Western Theater. Please transfer me."
Right.
He wrote a private letter to Seddon, requesting that he be transferred to serve under his old friend, Joey Johnson. He followed this up in conversations with his congressional ally, Wigfall, who had long considered Longstreet a suitable replacement for Braxton Bragg. Bragg, he had a poor combat record, yes he did, was very unpopular with his men and officers. Lee, President Davis, they then agreed to the request September 5th. McLaws, Hood, and a brigade from Pickett's division and Alexander's 26-gun artillery battalion that traveled over 16 railroads on a 775-mile route through the Carolinas to go say, "Bragg, we're here now, baby, in Northern Virginia," or Georgia.
Right. Get the hell out of here, bud. 8th of September, 1863. Reinforcements on the way. Bragg gave up the fortified city and critical rail juncture of Chattanooga, Tennessee.
Yeah.
The Rosecrans overtook him without a fight and retreated into Georgia. Bragg did. The troop transfer took over 3 weeks. Lead elements of the Corps arrived on September 17th. On the 19th, at the Battle of Chickamauga, Bragg began an unsuccessful attempt to interpose his army between Rosecrans and Chattanooga before the arrival of the most of Longstreet's corps. Throughout that very day, Confederate troops launched largely ineffectual assaults on Union positions that were highly costly for both sides.
One of Longstreet's own divisions under Hood successfully resisted a strong Union counterattack from Jefferson C. Davis's division of the 20th Corps that afternoon. When Longstreet himself arrived on the field in the late evening, he failed to find Bragg's headquarters. He and his staff spent considerable time riding looking for it. They accidentally came across a Federal picket line and nearly were captured. Jeez. How do you not know where this guy's... Nobody on the freaking battlefield or in the vicinity knew where Bragg was?
When the two finally met at Bragg's headquarters late at night, Bragg placed Longstreet in command of the left wing of his army. Lieutenant General Leonidas Polk commanded the right. Longstreet's command consisted of Simon Bolivar Buckner's corps, under which were the divisions of Alexander P. Stewart and William Preston, Bushrod Johnson's division, Thomas C. Hinman's division, Hood's division. McLaws' divisions fell under Longstreet's command, but did not even completely arrive from Virginia until 21st of September, after the Battle of Chickamauga had ended. Good for him. That guy didn't have to mess with it.
Well, meanwhile, Joseph Kershaw was placed in command of his two brigades, which were on the field. Bragg made a plan for an attack at 8 a.m. September 20th. Longstreet lined up most of his men in two lines, but he placed Hood's division behind Johnson in a column, intended to shock troops. The attack was supposed to begin early in the morning, shortly after an assault by Polk's wing. However, confusion and mishandled orders, it caused Polk's attack to be delayed, and Longstreet's advance did not begin until just after 11 after hearing gunfire from his left.
So much stupidity in this war, from confusion and mishandled orders. I mean,
And egos, just guys
holy shit.
being dicks.
A mistaken order from General Rosecrans, and the North's still doing it as well. A mistaken order from General Rosecrans caused a gap to appear in the Union line by transferring Thomas Wood's division from the right to reinforce the 14th Corps under George Henry Thomas in the center. Longstreet took advantage of the confusion. The organization of the attack was well suited to the terrain and would have penetrated the Union line regardless. Johnson's division poured through the gap, driving the Union forces backwards. After Longstreet ordered Hindman's division forward, the Union right all but collapsed.
Well, Rosecrans, he fled as units began to retreat in panic. Thomas managed to rally the retreating units and solidify a defensive position on Snodgrass Hill. He held that position against repeated afternoon attacks by Longstreet, who was not adequately supported by the Confederate right wing. Sorrell told Stuart to move his division forward to attack the Union rearguard. Stuart initially declined, demanding confirmation from Longstreet. Longstreet, he was incensed at his refusal and ordered him to go forward, damn it.
Wow. Well, Stuart, he did as told and captured about 400 prisoners. But Thomas had already managed to extricate the units under his control to Chattanooga. Bragg's failure to coordinate the right wing and cavalry to further envelop Thomas prevented a total rout of the Union army. Bragg also refused to pursue the retreating Federals aggressively, resulting in the futile siege of Chattanooga. He had dismissed a proposal from Longstreet that he'd do so, citing a lack of transportation, calling the plan a visionary scheme. Oh, wow. How the hell do you get a fort named after him?
Right.
Nevertheless, Chickamauga was the greatest Confederate victory in the Western theater, and Longstreet received significant credit.
For you, buddy. Well, not long after that, the Confederates entered Tennessee following their victory. Longstreet clashed with Bragg and became a leader of the group of senior commanders who conspired to have him gone. Bragg's subordinates had long been dissatisfied with his abrasive personality and poor battlefield record. The arrival of Longstreet, who was the senior lieutenant general in the Army, and his officers, and the fact that they quickly took their side added credibility to the earlier claims. Yeah, they're like, finally somebody came in and did something.
Right. Longstreet, he wrote to Sedan.
Damn, Hussein?
I'm convinced that nothing but the hand of God can save us or help us as long as we have our present commander. As he's talking about Bragg. Situation became so grave that Davis was forced to intercede in person.
Oh, in person.
Wow, showing his stupid face. What followed was a scene in which Bragg sat red-faced as a procession of his subordinates condemned him. Oh, that's gotta suck. Longstreet stated that Bragg was incompetent to manage an army or put men into a fight, and that he knew nothing of the business. Oh, wow.
Well, now I can't wait to get the Bragg story because what the hell's going on with this guy?
Wow, on the 12th of October, Davis declared his support for Bragg. Oh. He left him and his dissatisfied subordinates in their positions.
Well, Bragg, he relieved or reassigned the generals who had testified against him and retaliated against Longstreet by reducing his command to only those units he brought with him from Virginia.
Well, whatever.
Bragg, he resigned himself to the siege in Chattanooga. At about this time, Longstreet learned of the birth of a son who was named Robert Lee. Oh, Robert Lee Longstreet, huh? Grant, he arrived in Chattanooga October 23rd, took overall command of the new Union Military Division of Mississippi. He then replaced Rosecrans with Thomas. While Longstreet's relationship with Bragg was extremely poor, his connections with his subordinates also deteriorated.
Oh, jeez. He wanted to go to Western Theater so bad.
Yeah.
Wow. He had a strong antebellum friendship with McLaws, but they began to show signs of souring after McLaws criticized Longstreet's conduct at Gettysburg and was accused by Longstreet of displaying lethargy after Chickamauga.
Wow.
Hood's old division was under the temporary command of Brigadier General Micah Jenkins. The brigadier general who had been in the division the longest was Evander Law, who had temporarily commanded the division more than once in the past. However, Jenkins outranked Law. Jenkins and Law disliked each other as well, and both desired permanent command of the division. Ooh, duel. Yes. Longstreet favored Jenkins. Aw. His longtime protege, while most of the men favored Law. Longstreet had asked Davis to name a permanent commander, but he said no.
He's like, dude, this is your stuff. October 27th, Union troops managed to open up a cracker line to assess food to access food by defeating Law's brigade under Jenkins at the Battle of Brown's Ferry. In the nighttime Battle of Wauhatchie, October 28th to 29th, Jenkins failed to regain the lost position, for which he blamed Law and Brigadier General Jerome Robertson.
Oh, jeez.
Always somebody else. Longstreet, he took no immediate action against Law, but complained about Robertson.
Oh, jeez.
A court of inquiry was set up, but its proceedings were suspended, and Robertson returned to command.
All for naught.
So nothing.
No, after the old rebel failures, Longstreet devised a strategy to prevent reinforcement and lifting of the siege by Grant. He knew this Union reaction was underway, and that the nearest railhead was Bridgeport, Alabama. This is where portions of 2 Union Corps would soon arrive in Bridgeport, Alabama. After sending his artillery commander, Porter Alexander, to reconnoiter the Union occupied town, he devised a plan to shift most of the Army of Tennessee away from the siege, setting up a logistical support in Rome, Georgia. Georgia? Then he wanted to go after Bridgeport to take the railhead, possibly catching Hooker.
Oh, no.
Who was leading a detachment of arriving Union troops from the Eastern Theater in a disadvantageous position.
The plan was well received and approved by old President Davis.
Oh, wow.
But it was disapproved by Bragg, who objected to the significant logistical challenge it posed. Longstreet accepted Bragg's arguments and agreed to a plan in which he and his men were dispatched to East Tennessee to deal with an advance by the Union Army of Ohio, which was commanded by Burnside. Longstreet, he was selected both due to enmity on Bragg's part and because the War Department intended for Longstreet's men to return to Lee's army anyway. And this movement, he said, you're going that way anyways, might as well go there. And thus, this begins the Knoxville campaign.
Ooh-wee. Longstreet criticized for the slow pace of his advance toward Knoxville.
They're just going to criticize this guy for everything he does.
Right. And some of his soldiers began using the nickname Peter the Slow to describe him.
Oh.
At the Battle of Campbell Station on November 16th, the Federal allies evaded Longstreet's troop. This was due to both to the poor performance of Law, who exposed his brigade to the enemy, and thus ruined what was supposed to be a surprise attack, and also Burnside's skillful retreat. The old rebels also dealt with muddy roads and a shortage of good supplies.
They got those bad ones, though. Burnside settled into entrenchments around the city, which Longstreet besieged. Longstreet learned that Bragg had been defeated at Chattanooga on November 25th, and that Major General William Sherman's men were marching to relieve Burnside. He decided to risk a frontal attack on Union entrenchments before they arrived. November 29th, he sent his troops forward at the Battle of Fort Sanders, which was repulsed, and Longstreet, he said, I got to retreat.
Oh, wow.
Wasn't he so against the frontal assault on Gettysburg or something, and now he wants to use one when he knows it's probably going to fail?
Oh, man. When Grant defeated Bragg, Longstreet was ordered to join forces with the Army of Tennessee in northern Georgia. He demurred and began to move back to Virginia, soon pursued by Sherman. Longstreet defeated Federal troops in an engagement at Bean Station.
Flicking the bean.
Ooh, on the 14th of December. The greatest effect of the campaign was to deprive Bragg of troops he sorely needed in Chattanooga. Longstreet's second independent command, after Suffolk, was a failure, and his self-confidence was damaged.
After he was criticizing Bragg, and look at what he does. He reacted to the failure of the campaign by blaming others, as everybody does. He relieved McLaws from command and requested the court-martial of Robertson and Law.
Oh, and Law.
He also submitted a letter of resignation to Adjutant General Samuel Cooper, December 30th, 1863, but obviously that was denied.
They ain't letting nobody leave the Confederate Army.
Bragg was actually then relieved from command and replaced by Joseph Johnson, December 27th, though.
Longstreet established winter quarters in Russellville and Morristown. He attempted to keep communications open with Lee's army in Virginia, but Federal Cavalry Brigadier General William Averell's raids destroyed the railroads, isolating him and forcing him to rely only on eastern Tennessee for supplies. Longstreet's corps suffered through a severe winter in eastern Tennessee with inadequate shelter and provisions. More than half the men were without shoes. Ooh. Writing to Georgia's Quartermaster General Ira Rowe Foster on the 24th of January, 1864, Longstreet noted, "There are 5 Georgia brigades in this army, all alike in excessive need of shoes, clothing of all kinds, and blankets. All that you can send will be thankfully received."
We don't have any.
Right. In February of 1864, the lines of communication were repaired. Once the weather warmed, Longstreet's men marched north to the Army of Northern Virginia at Gordonsville.
Said, I'm home. Well, in March, Longstreet did indeed rejoin the Army of Northern Virginia. Presented by Lee with a plan for a joint offensive by Johnson and Longstreet into Kentucky, Longstreet made the scheme bolder by adding 20,000 men under General Beauregard, who was headquartered in South Carolina. However, the plan met was met with disapproval from Davis and his newly appointed military advisor, ding, 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 Braxton Bragg.
Oh, vendettas.
Right, and Longstreet just remained in Virginia.
Oh, jeez.
He later discovered that his old friend, U.S. Grant, had been appointed General-in-Chief of the Union Army, with his headquarters in the field alongside the Army of the Potomac.
Oh.
And guess what?
Ooh, right.
He knows what's about to happen.
Longstreet told his fellow officers that he will fight us every day and every hour until the end of the war.
And boy, was he right, except for that one lull in
Right.
Petersburg, but I guess they did skirmishes.
Longstreet helped save the Confederate Army from defeat in his first battle back with Lee's army, the Battle of Wilderness, in May of 1864. Grant moved south of the Rapidan River in an attempt to take Richmond. Lee intended to delay battle to give Longstreet's 14,000 men time to arrive. Grant disrupted these plans by attacking them on the 5th of May, and the fighting was inconclusive. The following morning at 5 a.m., Hancock led 2 divisions in a ferocious attack on A.P. Hill's corps, driving the men back 2 miles.
2 miles. Well, at the same time this was happening, Longstreet's men arrived. They took advantage of an old roadbed built for an out-of-use railroad to creep through a densely wooded area unnoticed before launching a powerful flanking attack. Longstreet's men moved forward along the Orange Plank Road against the Second Corps, and in 2 hours nearly drove it from the field. He developed tactics to deal with difficult terrain, ordering the advance of 6 brigades by heavy skirmish lines, which allowed his men to deliver a continuous fire into the enemy while proving to be elusive targets themselves.
Wow.
Shoot and run, shoot and move.
What a nice. Historian Edward Steer attributed much of the success of the Army to the display of tactical genius by Longstreet, which more than redressed his disparity in numerical strength. After the war, Hancock said to Longstreet of this flanking maneuver, "You rolled me up like a wet blanket." During the assault, Longstreet was wounded by friendly fire, only 4 miles away from where Stonewall Jackson was killed, exactly a year earlier during the Chancellorsville campaign. A bullet passed through his shoulder, severing nerves and tearing a gash in his throat.
He was gone for a while. Well, Jenkins, who was riding with Longstreet, was also shot and died from his wounds. The momentum of the attack subsided. Right?
Protege.
As he was taken from the field, Longstreet urged Lee to press the attack. Instead, Lee delayed further movement until units could be realigned, giving the Union defenders adequate time to reorganize. The subsequent attack was a failure. According to Alexander, he says, "I have always believed that, but for Longstreet's fall, the panic which was fairly underway in Hancock's Second Corps would have been extended and have resulted in Grant's being forced to retreat back across the Rapidan."
Probably.
Yeah, well, didn't happen.
Well, Longstreet was succeeded in command of his corps by R.H. Anderson. He missed the rest of 1864 spring and summer campaign, where Lee sorely missed his skill in handling the army. Without him, the old rebel army fought Grant at Spotsylvania Courthouse and was besieged by Union forces at Petersburg. He was treated in Lynchburg, Virginia, and recuperated in Augusta, Georgia, with his cousin Emma Eve Longstreet Sibley, the daughter of his father's brother, Gilbert.
All right. Well, in Augusta, he participated in the funeral service for Polk. Oh, yeah. At St. Paul's Church, casting earth onto the coffin.
No.
He then rejoined Lee, finally, October 1864, with his right arm paralyzed and in a sling, initially unable to even ride a horse. He had taught himself to write with his left hand, and by periodically pulling on his arm, as advised by doctors, he regained the use of his right hand in his later years.
Oh, good for him.
At this time, Longstreet's staff underwent major changes, most significantly the transfer of Sorrell, who was Longstreet's chief of staff, to brigade command.
He was replaced by Major Osmond Latrobe. For the remainder of the siege of Petersburg, Longstreet commanded the defenses in front of the capital of Richmond, including all forces north of the James River and Pickett's division at Bermuda Hundred. He retreated with Lee in the Appomattox campaign, commanding both the 1st and 3rd Corps following the death of A.P. Hill on the 2nd of April.
Oh, A.P. Hill.
And just a couple more days, A.P. could have been living.
Right. As Lee's army attempted to escape to Farmville, that's a fucking game. Longstreet was engaged at Sailor's Creek April 6th. The Confederates were unable to reach the town, but with the assistance of troops under Anderson and Ewell, they managed to prevent Federal troops from blocking the Army's last path of escape. The overall battle ended in disaster. Nearly 7,000 of the 10,000 Confederate troops engaged were either killed, wounded, or captured. By April 7th, Lee's army had been reduced from nearly 40,000 men to about 25,000. That's crazy.
Damn. A group of rebel officers, including...
That was just from
Right.
March 31st to April 7th.
That's terrible. A group of Confederate officers, including William Pendleton, the chief artillery, concluded that the time had come to ask Lee to open negotiations for the Army's surrender.
Yeah.
Pendleton approached Longstreet and asked him to intercede with Lee, but he refused, saying, "If General Lee doesn't know when to surrender until I tell him, he'll never know." He don't listen to him anyway. Pendleton approached Lee, who was in communication with Grant on the subject of surrender. Lee refused to surrender the army, and he held his last conference of war on the night of April 8th. He's like, "We gotta do it. We gotta go."
It was decided that at daybreak, Longstreet would hold the Union troops back while John Gordon would lead an escape towards Lynchburg and then cover his retreat. At the Battle of Appomattox Courthouse that morning, Longstreet was heavily engaged with the Union Second Corps under Andrew Humphreys. Gordon's troops were surrounded, and he requested reinforcements, which Longstreet couldn't give him. Lee, he was left with no alternative but to meet Grant to discuss the surrender.
Lee worried that his refusal to meet with Grant to discuss surrender terms at the latter's first request would cause him to demand harsher terms. Longstreet advised him of his belief that Grant would treat him fairly. He's a good man. As Lee rode toward Appomattox Courthouse on April 9th, I can't believe what just happened. Last 4.5 years. What the hell? Longstreet said if that Grant gave too strong demands, he ought to break off the interview and tell General Grant to do his worst. Oh. Might as well just kill him there.
Right.
After Lee's surrender, Longstreet arrived in the McLean house, where Grant happily greeted him. He offered Longstreet a cigar, and invited him to play cards.
Well, it's not Grant. It's not time for cards right now, dude.
Longstreet later told a reporter, "Why do men fight who are born to be brothers?" His whole greeting and conduct towards us, as though nothing had ever happened to mar our pleasant relations.
Well, because he knew he had the upper hand.
Right.
He was going to treat you guys like royalty. Because he's like, I got you.
He's like, "Don't worry, we'll treat Jefferson Davis like shit."
Right. June 7th, 1865, Lee, Longstreet, and other former Confederate officers, they were indicted by a grand jury in Norfolk, Virginia for the high crime of treason against the United States, which is a capital offense, meaning bye-bye.
Yeah.
Grant objected and went to the White House, telling President Andrew Johnson that the men were on parole and protected by the surrender terms at Appomattox anyway.
Damn right.
When Grant threatened to resign, Johnson backed down. And on June 20th, Attorney General James Speed ordered the United States Attorney in Norfolk to drop the charges. Damn, Grant, you just saved their lives, dude,
You ain't
for real.
kidding.
Because Lee would definitely would have been convicted.
Well, and he dies 3 years later.
Well,
anyway.
I mean, so?
Longstreet and his family settled in Nolens.
Oh.
Popular among former Confederate generals.
I bet it was.
Further south he can get. Well, besides Florida. He entered into a cotton brokerage partnership and became president of the Southern and Western Life and Accident Insurance Company. He sought the presidency of the Mobile and Ohio Railroad, but unsuccessful, and also failed in an attempt to get investors for a proposed railroad from New Orleans to Monterrey, Mexico. With Grant's support, he applied for a pardon from Johnson. Johnson said no. He told Longstreet, "There are 3 persons of the South who can never receive amnesty: Mr. Davis, General Lee, and yourself. You have given the Union cause too much trouble."
Damn. Yeah, Lee didn't get his citizenship back until, like, way later. Longstreet called for Southern acceptance of Reconstruction and acquiescence to federal laws, including those abolishing slavery and granting citizenship to blacks. He encouraged Southern whites to join the heavily Northern Republican Party, arguing that if they did not, the Southern wing of the party would be exclusively dominated by blacks.
You ain't kidding.
Whereas white men joining the party would allow the black vote to be controlled.
No.
All right. June 1868, the Radical Republican, they controlled the United States Congress. They enacted a law that granted pardons and restored political rights to numerous former Confederate officers, which included Longstreet.
Hey, look at you, bud. Good for you. Longstreet joined the Republicans, or as Southerners sometimes call them, Black Republicans. He endorsed Grant for president in 1868, attended his inauguration in Washington, and 6 days later was appointed by Grant as Surveyor of Customs in New Orleans. The post carried an annual salary of $6,000.
Damn, dude, Grant just hooked him up.
And Longstreet was confirmed by the Senate by a vote of 25 to 10. Oh, those 10 people are bastards.
Right.
For these acts, he lost favor with many white Southerners who regarded him as a traitor for supporting the people they viewed as oppressive
Oh,
occupiers.
get over it.
His old friend D.H. Hill wrote to a newspaper, "Our scallywag is the local leaper of the community."
Or leper. But yeah, damn, TH.
Leaper.
It's a leper.
Yeah, the leper.
In contrast to Northerners who moved south and were sometimes referred to as carpetbaggers, Hill wrote, Longstreet is a native, which is so much the worse. Longstreet did not retreat in the face of criticism. He actively supported Henry Warmoth, the Republican governor of Louisiana and former Union officer.
Oh, wow.
May of 1870, Warmoth named him Adjutant General of the Louisiana State Militia.
Nice.
And about a month later, he was named president of the newly organized New Orleans and Northeastern Railroad.
Bud. That's what you wanted.
He chums up to the bad guys and gets everything he wants. That's what Rock would have gave Cody.
Right. Wow. On the 8th of January, 1872, Longstreet was commissioned a major general in the state militia and assigned to the command of all militia and police forces in New Orleans. Oh, damn.
Police forces.
Shortly after, he resigned his post as a collector of customs and as a railroad president, followed in April by his position as adjutant general in the militia. Authors espousing the Lost Cause, a movement that glorified the Southern cause and denounced Reconstruction, attacked Longstreet's war career for years after his death because they're idiots.
Well, modern authors trace that criticism to Longstreet's acceptance of the defeat and accommodations both with the Republican Party and freed blacks. What are you supposed to do? Live forever and be...
Right.
I mean, you guys lost. Get over it.
Right. Racist Democrats.
Jeez. The attacks formally began January 19, 1872, which is the anniversary of Lee's birth, and less than 2 years after Lee died. Juba Early, in a speech at Washington College, exonerated Lee for the defeat at Gettysburg. Oh. He accused Longstreet of attacking late on the second day and held him accountable for the debacle on the third. Oh. The following year, William Pendleton claimed in the same venue that Longstreet disobeyed an illicit order to attack at sunrise July 2nd. The so-called sunrise order was a fabrication.
Yes, as we all know. April of 1873, Longstreet dispatched a police force under Colonel Theodore Decline. He said, "Go to Colfax, Louisiana. I want you to help the local government and its majority black supporters. They need help defending themselves against an insurrection by white supremacists." Yeah, there's a lot of insurrections going on back then.
Yeah.
Decline did not arrive until the 14th of April, one day after the Colfax massacre.
Yeah.
I think he knew something. His man's task consisted of mainly burying blacks who had been killed and attempting to arrest the culprits. During protests of election irregularities in 1864, 1874, referred to as the Battle of Liberty Place, an armed force of 8,400 members of the anti-Reconstructionist White League. They advanced on the State House in New Orleans, which was the capital of Louisiana at the time. Isn't it where they had two governors?
No.
No,
this one, yeah, right here. But it happened all in the South, dude. They were like literally fighting each other sometimes. Remember, we had it in
right. Yeah.
So one of those episodes.
Right. Yeah, they were pissed because the Republican William Pitt Kellogg was declared the winner of a close and heavily disputed gubernatorial. I never know.
Gubernatorial.
Right, of a heavily disputed election.
Longstreet commanded a force of 3,600 Metropolitan Police, City Police, and African-American militia troops, armed with 2 Gatling guns and a battery of artillery. He rode to meet the protesters, but was pulled from his horse, shot by a spent ball, and taken prisoner.
Oh, shit.
The White League charged, causing many of Longstreet's men to flee or surrender. Total casualties amounted to 38 killed, 79 wounded. Federal troops sent by President Grant were required to restore order. Yeah, we'd read it in Grant's. Yeah. Longstreet's use of armed black troops during the disturbances increased the denunciations by anti-Reconstructionists. Like, look at this guy.
Right. Wow, 1875, Longstreet began to challenge the criticism of his war record, demanding evidence from Pendleton and Lee's staff officers. By then, these charges, alongside anger at him for use of black troops in Louisiana, had destroyed his reputation.
Amongst who?
Right.
Racists?
Longstreet published a series of articles defending his war record. At the very same time, he became popular with Northerners, who thought highly of his support for Reconstruction and praise for Grant. Throughout the 1880s and 1890s, Longstreet often gave speeches in the North, many of them in the presence of Union veterans, and was received favorably.
Good for you, buddy.
Should have fought for the Union, bud.
Right. A large ceremony took place in Atlanta in 1886 to mark the 25th anniversary of the attack of Fort Sumter. Longstreet was not invited, but he went anyway.
Oh, wow.
He was embraced by Jefferson Davis, and a crowd cheered. Oh, it's for, like, the Confederates, clearly. In 1875, the Longstreet family left New Orleans with concerns over health and safety. They returned to Gainesville, Georgia. By this time, Louise had given birth to 10 children, 5 of whom lived adulthood. I mean, you had to give,
right.
Statistically, half of them were going to die. Longstreet continued to serve on the city school board and as an administrator of the University of Louisiana, which is later Tulane University.
Oh, really?
March 1877, one of his frequent trips to New Orleans on business Longstreet converted to Catholicism and remained a devout believer until his death. I mean, he was Episcopal. What the hell's the difference? Father Abram Ryan, author of The Conquered Banner, he encouraged Longstreet to convert, assuring him he would be welcome with open arms if he came into the church.
I mean,
why wouldn't you?
Right. Longstreet applied for various jobs throughout the Rutherford B. Hayes administration of 1877 to 1881.
Who?
And was briefly considered for Secretary of the Navy.
Oh, briefly.
He served briefly as a Deputy Collector of Internal Revenue.
Oh.
And as Postmaster of Gainesville. Oh, nice. Longstreet's chief ambition was to be United States Marshal of Georgia. President Hayes appointed Longstreet as his minister resident to the Ottoman Empire, to a position he held from December 14th, 1880 to April 29th, 1881. He didn't like those Russians.
Well, Ottoman's Turkey, but
I mean, Turkey, yeah.
Longstreet suffered from the high cost of living in Constantinople. Constantinople, right? Constantinople prevented him from bringing his family, and the entertainment that he was expected to provide left him financially worse off than when he arrived. Well, his only known accomplishment was convincing Sultan Abdul Hamid II to reverse his position, forbidding American archaeologists from undertaking research in Ottoman territories.
Bitch, why?
He was granted a 60-day leave to tour Europe before being recalled in accordance with his own desires after the marshal position became available. He said, I got to go back.
All right. Longstreet served as the United States Marshal of Georgia from 1881 to 1884. But the return of a Democratic administration under Grover Cleveland in 1885 ended his political career.
Yep.
And he went into semi-retirement on a 65-acre farm near Gainesville. He raised turkeys, planted orchards and vineyards on terraced ground that his neighbors referred to jokingly as Gettysburg.
If you only knew what Gettysburg was, you wouldn't be joking.
Devastating fire on April 9th. A lot of bad things happened on April 9th. 1889 destroyed his house and many of his possessions, including his personal papers and memorabilia. That December,
to make matters worse,
Lois Longstreet,
Louise,
dead.
Yeah. Longstreet rebutted criticism of his war record from other Confederates in his memoirs From Manassas to Appomattox, a labor of 5 years published in 1896. Piston, biographer guy, he describes the prose as entertaining if occasionally labored.
Oh.
In the book, Longstreet praises several Civil War officers, but frequently disparages others, particularly his post-war detractors Juba Early and Fitzhugh Lee.
Oh, wow.
Oh, Lee's son. He expresses personal affection for Lee, but is at times critical of his strategy. I mean,
What are you going to do?
Piston argues that the quality of the book is diminished by bitterness and lack of objectivity. It did little to alter the views of Longstreet's opponents.
Right.
I mean,
Longstreet served from 1897 to 1904 under Presidents William McKinley and Theodore Roosevelt as United States Commissioner of Railroads, succeeding Wade Hampton III.
Wade Hampton? Was he a Confederate?
1897, at the age of 76, in a ceremony at the governor's mansion in Atlanta, Longstreet married 34-year-old librarian Helen Dortch. Aw, good for you, 34-year-old librarian. Oh. Although Longstreet's children reacted poorly to the marriage, Helen became a devoted wife and an avid supporter of his legacy after his death. She outlived him by 58 years.
Good Lord.
Dying in 1962.
Damn, she went through everything, dude.
In 1898, Longstreet, then 77, volunteered to lead the United States troops in Cuba during the Spanish-American War. Damn.
Well, I don't think that happened, but did he? I don't think so. Longstreet's final years were marked by poor health and partial deafness. 1902, he suffered from severe rheumatism and was unable to stand for more than a few minutes at a time. His weight diminished from 200 to 135 by January of 1903. Cancer developed in his right eye, and in December he had X-ray therapy in Chicago to treat it. Okay. He then contracted pneumonia and died in Gainesville January 2nd, 1904. Bishop Benjamin Joseph Keeley, who had served under Longstreet, said his funeral mass. He's buried at Alta Vista Cemetery in Gainesville. He did outlive most of his detractors and was one of only a few general officers from the Civil War to live into the 20th century, right?
Good for him.
Crazy.
Take a look at his old legacy. Longstreet was subject to vigorous attacks over his war record beginning in the 1870s and continuing after his death. His widow published Lee and Longstreet at high tide in his defense and stated that the South was sedaciously taught to believe that the federal victory was wholly the fortuitous outcome of the culpable disobedience of General Longstreet. Was it, though?
Well, in the first half of the 20th century, Freeman, he kept criticism of Longstreet foremost in Civil War scholarship in his biography of Lee. Oh. Speaking of Gettysburg, July 2nd, he says, the battle was being decided at that very hour in the mind of Longstreet, who, at his camp a few miles away, was eating his heart away in sullen resentment that Lee had rejected his long-cherished plan of a strategic offensive and a tactical defensive.
Right.
He was mad.
He called Longstreet's performance so sluggish that it has often been asked why Lee did not arrest him for insubordination or order him before a court-martial. Freeman moderated his views in his later Lee's Lieutenants, A Study in Command, where he states that Longstreet's attitude was wrong, but his instinct was correct. He should have obeyed orders, but the order should not have been given.
Two things can be true.
Clifford Doughty, a Virginia newspaperman and novelist, he was noted for his severe criticism of Longstreet in the 1950s and 60s. Cool.
In 1974, Michael Shara's novel, The Killer Angels, about the Battle of Gettysburg, was published, based in part on Longstreet's memoirs. Isn't that what they based the Gettysburg movie off of?
Maybe.
The 1993 book was adapted into a film, Gettysburg. Or in 1993. Yeah. Longstreet is depicted very favorably in the both.
He is.
Significantly improving his standing in popular imagination. Historians Thomas Connolly and Barbara Bellow's book, God in General,
Which also became
Longstreet. It also upgraded Longstreet through an attack on Lee, the Lost Cause, and the Virginia Revisionists.
1993, Wirt published a new Longstreet biography, stating that his subject was the finest corps commander in the Army of Northern Virginia. In fact, he was arguably the best corps commander in the conflict on either side.
Probably true.
It's close. Military historian Richard L. DiNardo, he wrote, even Longstreet's most virulent critics have conceded that he put together the best staff employed by any commander, and that his de facto chief of staff, Lieutenant Colonel G. Moxley Sorrell, was the best staff officer in the Confederacy.
Noting Longstreet's delegation of control of the battlefield movements to his staff, DiNardo argues that this allowed him to communicate more effectively during battles.
Yeah.
Praise for Longstreet's political conduct is tempered by the fact that he urged white acceptance of Reconstruction, at least in part so that whites and not blacks would have the preeminent role in rebuilding the South, right? Nevertheless, he has been commended for his willingness to work with the North, support for black voting rights, and bravery in leading a partially black militia to suppress. Yes.
Nice. Good for him.
Good for you, buddy.
Longstreet is remembered in his hometown of Gainesville, Georgia, through the Longstreet Bridge.
Why don't they just name a street Longstreet?
Right. A portion of United States Route 129. It crosses the Chattahoochee River, which is later dammed to form Lake Sidney Lanier, and the Longstreet chapter of the United Daughters of the Confederacy. 1998, one of the last monuments erected at the Gettysburg National Military Park was dedicated to Longstreet. An equestrian statue by sculptor Gary Castile. The monument was funded through a grassroots campaign and is one of the very few Confederate monuments in the park, not paid for by taxpayers in the states of the former Confederacy.
Oh, right. In order to get a Confederate monument, they were like, when you fork it over, then.
Yep, bitch.
These two monuments are the only two memorials to Longstreet, whereas there was once more statues of Nathan Bedford Forrest in Tennessee than there were of U.S. President Andrew Jackson.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. At least one historian attributes this to Longstreet's defense of the rights of the freedmen and women, whereas Forrest was considered the avenging angel of American white supremacy and the Lost Cause myth. Yeah.
Okay.
He was like leader of the Ku Klux Klan or some shit at one point, I think.
Yeah.
Longstreet's billet, the house in Russellville, Tennessee, that was occupied by Longstreet in the winter of 63-64, it's now called the Longstreet Museum.
Oh, that's nice. Longstreet is a minor character in two novels by Ben Ames Williams, one of his descendants. Oh. House Divided in 1947 and The Unconquered in 1953. He appears as a cadet in Santa Fe Trail in 1940, played by actor Frank Wilcox. Longstreet plays a prominent role in Michael Shara's Pulitzer Prize-winning novel The Killer Angels.
Yep.
Also the film Gettysburg, portrayed by Tom Berenger. He is also featured in Shara's son Jeff Shara's novel Gods and Generals, a prequel to his father's novel, focused on the Eastern Theater before Gettysburg. In the film Gods and Generals 2003, he is portrayed by Bruce Boxleitner in a minor role. In Harry Turtledove's alternate history series Southern Victory, Longstreet served as the 4th president of the Confederate States of America.
All right.
Oh, wow.
Oh, that's it. That's Longstreet. Nice little story from him.
Yeah.
Comeback story almost. Well, not really for his reputation, but he did some things after the war, which many people didn't.
Yeah.
So good for him. That's a long episode, so we're gonna end it right here. We'll be back next week. Maybe we'll take a look at the Lost Cause or Reconstruction. One of the two.
Something like that.
We'll do something other than a person next week. So,
Sure.
Either or, we'll be back for more Behind the Battles next week on Battles of the American Civil War. We are the Month of Michigan.
Bang, bang.